You've probably seen the usual lists about weird things Americans just cannot understand about the UK. I've definitely done a few myself, in all fairness. But most of the time, even in my videos, we've just skimmed the surface. Quirky accents, funny slang, and of course, the obsession with tea from the British. But today I want to do something a little bit different. Just go a little bit deeper underneath the surface in exploring 9 things that are perfectly normal in the UK that will genuinely confuse Americans even after being a few years in. I also want to talk a little bit about why those differences actually reveal something much deeper about each culture, the societies of them, and of course, how our environments shape our minds. If you've ever felt like culture shock or wondered why every day just feels different across the pond, this video is definitely for you. The right side of the road is what our normal flow of traffic is. If you're at a red light and the traffic is clear, you're perfectly free and legal to turn right into the traffic if as long as there's no posted signs. It's pretty efficient and expected and an earned privilege as you become a more experienced driver. But in the UK, you of course don't get that option. You wait at every red light, even if the road is clear, until it tells you that it's time to go. Plus, you have roundabouts, which basically the flow of traffic is much more constant rather than traffic lights that actually stop to let the other traffic going the other way go. So there's really no need for the right on red. Also, when you factor in the fact that you are on the other side of the street, then it would be a left on red, I guess, in the UK. Um, but it doesn't, you usually have an access road or you're able to just make a left on red, I suppose, if you can. But usually you have an access road, or like I said, it's a roundabout, so you can just make the left. As an American learning to drive here, a little bit frustrating at first just because I am always of the mindset if the road is clear, you should, be able to go. Obviously, you have to factor in that most of the time you don't have traffic lights here unless you actually need to stop the flow of traffic for safety reasons. And it does reflect a much bigger value, I think, that is here in the UK, which is shared predictability. It's less about grabbing the opportunity and seizing it once it's available to you for your personal agenda, and more about everyone in the community and society using the same rules in order to keep a steady flow of traffic and also reduce accidents overall. It's really a lesson in patience if you think about it, but also in trusting the system rather than relying on your own impulses at every turn. No pun intended. Hey y'all, thank you so much for watching and I hope you're enjoying this video. I wanted to let you know that channel members actually get early exclusive content, priority reply to comments, and so much more. If you could, would you mind just helping keep us as ad-free as possible by becoming a part of the Mandyverse Collective? Absolutely no pressure, just a quieter corner of YouTube if you want it. Just click that join button below. Thanks. The second thing that we're going to talk about is that most kids wear uniforms to school here. Obviously, starkly different from a lot of the public schools, public access schools in America. I know there are some districts and areas where the even for the public schools that the children do wear uniforms to school, but it's primarily a private school thing, meaning you're paying for tuition in order for your child to go there. That's usually when they would wear uniforms in the United States. They're definitely more optional in the US, and in some instances can even be considered oppressive, like you're taking away someone's freedom of expression and freedom of speech, actually, because the expression comes with speech, right? So some schools actually ban uniforms altogether and have just very loose dress codes in order for the child to attend school. In the UK, much stricter. Most schools here, at least public schools, which is what we're familiar with, they expect children to wear uniforms from a very, very young age. It's not just about neatness or discipline. It's about leveling the social playing field. It's about reducing visible class differences in a society that's still very aware of economic divides. Uniforms teach kids early on that school is a collective experience where individual status takes a backseat to the community belonging. And Ultimately, as a parent, I have to say I really enjoy the little added perk where I can always tell that there's an underage person by the fact that they're wearing a uniform. It helps me out a lot. And I'm just a little bit more aware and I have a heightened sensitivity to the fact that there's underage children around because I can easily pick them out, which is a lot harder in the US, especially if you have a child like mine who always looks much older. And especially when she's dressing in her normal clothes, she looks much older than her years. And I do think about that very much so while I'm out and about in the UK. Next thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that there are no school buses here, at least those iconic yellow school buses that we have in the United States. In the US, that is most children's primary vehicle to get to school. Either your parents will drop you off, which is very rare because of the fact of long commute times to work and stuff like that. And if you happen to be in an area where you could walk to your school, also not exactly abundant in America when you think about the space issue and everything. So a lot of kids rely very heavily on that school bus to get them safely to and from school. But in the UK, those buses are almost non-existent. They do have higher buses. Some of them are exclusive to, the routes that get you to and from the schools in the local area. Most of the time, they're city or town buses that the children use, or they go on the train or public transport. Yellow school buses are non existent. At least I have not seen any since I've been here for the past few years. Kids will walk, they'll cycle, they'll take the public transport, whatever means they can. Some parents are able to drop their kids off and pick them up. Of course, that again depends on their commute time, but it is a lot more prevalent here. I think because commute times are just cut down a little bit more here because of the space issue. It also means that children end up, it means I would like this because this setup means that independence starts early. Kids learn to navigate the city themselves. They develop this spatial awareness, they develop social cues a lot earlier, and they build a certain resilience that you just don't have in the US when you're so protected and everything is so controlled. It's a really small thing, but it's something I believe that really shifts the entire childhood experience around mobility and freedom. And even though I was a little apprehensive about it because of my personal experiences living in the UK for so long, I now see the confidence and how much my child has grown into adulthood towards adulthood. And I really, really appreciate that she has that opportunity. Number four, the fact that soda often uses real sugar. So this is something that might seem ridiculous to a lot of British people, but hear me out. If you grab a Coke in the UK, there's a really good chance that it's sweetened with cane sugar instead of high fructose corn syrup, which is often used in a lot of soft drinks in the United States. Again, this may sound really trivial, but it actually affects the taste quite significantly. I had a huge adjustment to the sodas and a lot of any of stuff that had sugar in it here in the UK when we first moved here because I had developed a dependency almost on high fructose corn syrup, which is not only used in a lot of the sodas in America, but a lot of the foods overall across the board. Corn is a very, very big commodity that is actually an industry that's subsidized by the US government. So corn syrup, it has high fructose, which means a lot of the artificial sugars and a lot of chemical enhanced sugars and flavors. So that corn syrup is actually used in tons and tons of foods and drinks in the United States. Again, it's a reminder that regulation, cultural preferences, and food industry practices vary quite dramatically between the United States and the US. And that even between these two countries that have very similar diets and seemingly access to the same types of food, even the fast food tastes completely different because of those regulations on high fructose corn syrup and some of the other ingredients that are used even in the processed foods here in the UK. So for Americans like me, tasting this difference can be a subtle reminder that what we eat is quite very much shaped by more than just the flavor of the food and the different ingredients you're putting together. It's a kind of a reflection on the economics, the policy, and the history of the culture you're now living in. Number five is the shops closing early, especially on Sundays. Now, I definitely griped about this when I first moved here to the UK because I come from New Jersey. Of course, this might be different outside of the New Jersey and metropolitan Philadelphia area, But where I come from, there are shops open 24/7 all the time. If you're like me and you're an American that's used to 24-hour supermarkets and late night shopping, UK shop hours can feel somewhat restrictive. And it's just a really, really big cultural adjustment to get used to. Many stores will close by 5 or 6 p.m., and Sundays always, almost always, have very limited hours. They open late and they close early. This is because of laws here in the UK that protect the workers' rest. It's an acknowledgement that everyone needs downtime. Everyone needs to be able to, no one should be, everyone needs to be able to come down from their work week and be able to rest and recharge for the next work week. And it is a very, very welcome societal change now that I've gotten over the hump and gotten used to the scheduling differences. It does reflect a cultural commitment to a work life balance that is not at all prevalent in the US in most areas, at least I'm familiar with anyway. It prioritizes rest, it prioritizes family time and community over endless consumer convenience. And that just because you may have what some would consider a menial job, which is not my definition, but a lot of people do think that, that just because you have a retail job doesn't mean that you don't deserve the same rest and relaxation as someone working for in an office, for example. It's a very different rhythm, and it's one that is not really conscious. It's just part of the society here, but it does carve out one, it does make sure that there's space carved out in a week for life beyond work and beyond shopping, which is very much appreciated. Number 6 is roundabouts are everywhere. Now, they are everywhere compared to where I'm from. In New Jersey, we did have a bunch of roundabouts. They've since been taken out because it's apparently a study proved that it was actually safer to have more traffic lights. And if anyone's been to New Jersey, even for like a minute, you notice that it's basically all shopping malls, traffic lights, and highways. So from where I'm used to, roundabouts are definitely something that is a bit of a novelty. And also, again, I am learning to drive here in the UK right now. And so that also means that I have to try to master roundabouts. And for those of you who don't know, they're like intersections, but they're in a circle, and you have basically side roads that veer off of the circle in order for you to make a left, to go straight, make a right, or make a U-turn. They apparently, from what I understand, they reduce stops, they prevent gridlock. Though I don't know if that's 100% true because I live near an outlet mall and it's always gridlocked in that area on the weekends. It also encourages a much smoother flow of traffic than traditional stoplights, which I do happen to agree with. Beyond the traffic, the roundabouts symbolize a cultural preference for flow and shared responsibility over rigid control, in my opinion. Instead of stop start dominance, it's about yielding, reading the room, and acknowledging everyone around you, which we can all probably attest to the fact is not an instinct most Americans have. Next up is that fewer people actually have and own cars. Car ownership isn't necessarily a universal thing in the UK like it is in America. It's not that people don't have them. There is a big driving culture here, and there are a lot of people that own their cars, especially if you're outside of town or in a village. But many people really rely on public transport, cycling, or walking places. This really changes how people experience distance, and how they engage with their community, and even the social status, in my opinion. Space is measured not just in miles, but by train stops or bus routes, or how long it actually takes to walk or bike there. Also, in my opinion, because it's much more walkable, it feels to me like the neighborhoods are just a lot more interconnected. It's easier to navigate as a foreigner, as someone who's not used to it and hasn't grown up in these systems. And it also reduces the isolation that I feel like car culture often produces in the United States. Number 8 is you don't have to carry your driver's license with you. In the US, it's a near legal requirement to carry your driver's license with you at all times. It's a form of not federal. It's a form of government ID. If you ever need ID for anything, driver's license is the perfect companion for that. And you have to have it also when you're driving, you're supposed to have it on you. And that is one of the first things that if you are involved in a traffic stop will be asked for by the police officer. Also, if you're involved in any kind of traffic stop or any kind of accident, the first thing that the police person will ask you is your proof of insurance and your driver's license in order to see that it's validated, that you aren't driving illegally in any way. Here in the UK, you don't have to have a physical driver's license on you. It's actually really unusual for people to have it here. And I think that highlights a very subtle difference, but an important one about identity and authority. Basically, that you just don't have to constantly be documented and monitored that you're documenting it properly. There's less pressure to prove yourself to institutions at every moment, which changes, I think, how people interact with authority, and they're less intimidated. It's less controlled by fear. And you have a lot more freedom as a citizen or resident here in the UK because of those looser laws. Lastly, we have that dogs are often off leash in parks. This is something that's very, very strange to me. I remember when we lived in America, when we had our house, there was tons of people that had dogs in the neighborhood, and we walk them through the neighborhood all the time. And it was really looked down on to have your dog off leash in America. But here and in many UK cities, it's completely normal to see dogs running free in parks, even those that are really crowded and have lots of other dogs around them. It's not that they don't have leash or lead laws here. It's just that people are just more free about letting their dogs be free. In the United States, the lease laws and fear of liability because of all of the litigation society that America has, fear of being sued, all of that. It just it keeps dogs very tethered, and it creates a lot of tension around having any dogs off leash. The difference here, in my opinion, reflects the levels of social trust and also informal regulation. So people assume responsibility for their pets and others in a way that lets freedom still exist, not just for the human beings involved, but also for the animals. And that it's alongside and coexists with safety. It's a balancing act that depends on community norms and social realization rather than strict enforcement and tension and fear. Now, none of these differences are just quirks or oddities. They're visible expressions of deeper values for each culture. Ideas about patience, about community, about trust, about balance, and ultimately about freedom. Understanding them has really helped me see how our culture and our environment shape not just how people behave, but how they think, how they feel, and how they react. And once I started to see those invisible rules, you definitely can't unsee them. And I felt like it made the culture shock sting a little bit less for me as an American living here in the UK.